Previously on Deepish Thoughts.
Basically, Jeff thinks that he's superior to me because he's extroverted and I'm more introverted. I think that kind of sums it up.
Yep. So anyways, welcome back to Deepish Thoughts.
Welcome back to Deepish Thoughts. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Jeff, and we are actually having a real conversation about being introverts and extroverts. This is the second part. If you didn't catch the first part, you should go back and watch the first part. I wasn't just criticizing.
No,
Jamie.
he wasn't.
I was being a lot more fair than that.
You were.
So,
yeah,
but
that's true.
But that's fine. So we're going to keep going with our conversation on being introverts or extroverts. I think our original title was Are Introverts or Extroverts Better? And so we're kind of going back and forth on some of that. We talked about, some misperceptions of introverts and extroverts. We talked about what we liked about being introverts or extroverts. Some of those things. It was really good. So go check it out. But getting back into the conversation, we're going to get straight to the meat of it right now. I want to ask you, Jamie, do you think that our society is more accommodating to introverts or extroverts? Do you feel like our society is kind of like, oh yeah, like favors one or the other, basically?
I mean, I don't want to sound like a martyr, but I think it's kind of an extrovert's world that we introverts are trying to make our way in.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think most introverts would probably agree with me that it feels that way. But tell me how it feels to you as an extrovert.
I think it's swinging more towards introverts these days. I mean, I think I agree with you. I think being an extrovert is more praised / more popular, but I feel like it's swinging in the other direction.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I think that's because I think that maybe that's wrong. But I think the reason I feel a little bit like that is because I feel like it's becoming a little more popular to be by yourself, but not necessarily in a healthy way. Just being by yourself is, I think, becoming a little bit more popular, more isolated. That's kind of more of the thing these days. You know what I mean?
Well, we're in a digital age that sort of, really makes that a lot more possible.
Right.
And kind of life is more conducive. It's more conducive to being by yourself. And I agree with you, but not in a healthy way. Like,
right.
We're kind of funneling people toward an unhealthy introversion in a way, I would say.
Yeah, just isolation.
Right.
And I see isolation, I guess I hear that word and I think that's negative. Being isolated is bad.
Right.
Right.
Alone time, or a rhythm of some alone time in your life is different than being isolated as a person, isn't it? In fact, going back to something you said in the previous episode, you could be an extrovert and around people a lot and still in a way be hiding behind a facade of some kind. So you're still kind of isolated. In a way. Yeah. But, here's the reason that I said I feel like society's a little more for the extroverted. And you kind of got at it. It's just more noticed. I mean, obviously, it's by definition, it's more noticed, right? Because you're out there. So it's a little more noticed and recognized. And, students in a classroom, it's the extroverted students that are going to get noticed, right? Negatively or positively,
right?
If they're out there. And I was a high school teacher for 3 years, and even as an introvert, I've been guilty of this, overlooking the introverts in the class because, they just don't jump up and grab your attention.
Yeah.
Probably other venues like job interviews and things like that, if you're, a lot more out there and expressive, it's just we're drawn to that.
Yeah.
Even as an introvert, I'm drawn to that. So that, I don't know. I feel like that makes it maybe a little easier for extroverts to get along in life. But life's hard for all of us, Yeah.
We each have our struggles.
Sure.
But I think what you're saying, I think that analysis is really correct. I think you're right on point where there's some things that we just deem attractive inherently. And I wonder if that's like a societal thing that we've learned to value, or if it's just like, hey, people generally just tend to value that. Maybe everybody's always valued that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be.
Do you think that's just like a human constant? Now we're getting real abstract. I gotta back off here. All right. But do you feel like that's just like a human thing, or do you think that that's societal?
Well, we're speculating,
right?
So I'll go ahead and speculate. It seems like it's just human to notice the more obvious things, right? Or the more out there things. So it seems like maybe it's human. I've also heard, and there's conflicting data on this as far as like what percentage, but generally, we think that there's probably quite a few more extroverts in the world. So if that's the case, then it would make sense too that society is a little more geared toward extroverts if there's more of them. And maybe they're more likely to be the ones out there making society what it is too, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
At least in some sense. But anyway, yeah, I do feel like I'm being a little bit of a martyr. But there's look, as introverts, there's ways we can figure out how to just still enjoy life, and maybe there's some hurdles, but whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, we figure it out.
Right.
And we all have to figure out, navigate those challenges in life, no matter whether we're an introvert, extrovert, or any other factor. I mean, it affects how we live, right? Sometimes we're just going to be challenged by stuff. Do you think, okay, this is a little bit more, I'm trying to like step off like the gas of being a little like more like philosophical here, because I don't want to go like super deep. It's deep-ish, right?
Right.
So let's speculate for a second.
Here we go.
Do you think, because when we think about like great thinkers in history, right, we're going to think of like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, are some of the classic ones we think of, and some others, of course. Stuff that you learn in philosophy class and stuff like that. Do you think that if you had your guess, would you guess that culture of like thinkers was generally more like extroverted or introverted? That's such an unfair question. So it's totally speculative. But I'm curious.
It seems like people who would sit around and write philosophy would be introverted. I don't know about society as a whole, but it seems like those, and I don't know, maybe they weren't. But it seems like, I mean, you're an extrovert, Jeff. Do you want to sit around and write lengthy philosophical treatises?
Not usually.
Yeah,
but
right?
sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I get in a mood, or I have a conversation like this, and then I'm like, I got to go like think about this. And then I like want to write about it or like process it some more. But yeah, I don't know. I was just wondering. I thought it was an interesting thought, whether they were introverted.
It's important that we have both in the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need people to think deep thoughts, but then we need conversation about it too. So it's good that we have both, kind of both, the whole spectrum.
Yeah. Well, a little bit ago, actually, no, not a little bit ago. Well, it was a little bit ago for us, but it was last episode for everyone else.
That's right.
We talked about being married to introverts or extroverts, and how we're each married to the opposite one, right?
That's right.
You're married to an extrovert, I'm married to an introvert, I think. So like, how do you make that work? Because there's a clash of values there.
Yeah.
And like that can create a lot of tension, I bet. And from my experience, but you've been married for a lot longer than I have. How do you guys make that work?
Well, I will say that it was hard. It was hard to navigate. One thing, I don't know if this is universally true of introverts, but I think it probably is. We can be a little more prone to depression and just kind of melancholic personalities, that type of thing. And I know that's been hard for my wife, and she's been a champ and super helpful and supportive of me. But I know also at times, when I was sort of at my lowest in terms of depression and introversion and things like that, it was hard for her because I didn't want to be around people, and she really did. And so that meant either she had to do it without me, or I had to buck up and force myself out there. And it was hard. It was hard to figure out. I guess step one to navigating all that was just recognizing where the other person is and what they need. We can be so selfish and just think about what I need, and I'm not getting what I need. If we're willing to, just realize what the other person needs, and if both parties are doing that, then you can start to sort of navigate that. And I think I don't want to speak for my wife, but I'm pretty sure that she would say the same thing I would say, and that is that we've actually helped each other a lot. Like we were talking about last episode, I've actually become more extroverted over time. I still lean introvert, but I've become even more social, even more willing to go out and be around people. And I think that's my wife's influence. She kind of helps me, because I know that's a need for her. So will do that. And I think she would say that I've helped her realize the value of just like, withdrawing and relaxing and reflecting and recovering and those type of things.
Yeah.
So
That's really good. Okay, does that ever bother you that like she like being married to her has changed you in that way?
I think, that's one of the values of marriage and even just friendship, right? As we help each other grow as people.
Sure.
So yeah, no, that doesn't bother me.
Okay. I was curious because I bet there are some people like well, okay, that's not fair. I think I've wrestled with that where I think I've gotten a little more introverted and I think I've gotten that a lot from Allison.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, sometimes I can feel like you're taking something away from me, like you're changing me, and I don't want to change. And I don't know if that's a fair
Well,
way to
maybe
feel.
since we're speculating a lot here, maybe it's a little harder for the extroverts to become more introverted. Maybe that feels like something taken away. Whereas as an introvert becoming a little more extroverted, maybe it feels like something more added to my life. I don't know.
That's true because if you're considering that like extroverts have a lot of people in their life and then they go from maybe say like X amount of people to now they're reducing that amount of people because they don't need as many. Well, that's all inherently going to come with like less people in your life and that might feel like a loss.
Right.
And so like, whereas, you're saying like an introvert, if they're becoming more extroverted a little bit, more social, then maybe they're adding more people to their life and that feels like a better exchange.
Sure. And it could probably, I'm sure that it feels like a loss or a cost of that personal time that you crave too, but there's always a balance.
That's
with
true.
Those things, right?
Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking for myself about being married to an introvert, I think it has been hard. It has been hard for us too, because I think we, like, I was telling somebody recently, I was like, man, like the biggest arguments that me and Allison have are about time and about how time is spent.
Yeah, we really relate to that.
Yeah. Because I'm like, we gotta go do stuff. We gotta go to this concert and we gotta go like be with friends and we gotta have like double dates and we gotta, all these things that I'm like, this is how life should be. Because I'm an extrovert, right? And I'm pretty extroverted. And so like I want to do that stuff all the time. Where she's just like, hey, can we just like stay at home and like, can we just like watch a show and like eat dinner together? Like that would be really nice. And it's just like, again, like we've done this like a million times. Like I don't know. I think I struggled with that, especially early on, and it's still early on. I mean, we're not even quite at 4 years married, and so I think we still struggle with that. And probably will for a while. That's okay, but I think I've also learned to appreciate that. Recently we had an evening just home together, that was just like we did our what I feel like is our classic like evening at home together thing, where it's like we get home from work and we just sit on the couch and we just kind of like talk about whatever for like an hour or an hour and a half, and then we make dinner and then we watch something or whatever. And I'm like, and I found, because we've been so busy lately, I found that having that, I was like, wow, this is really nice.
Yeah.
And it was weird because I think historically I probably wouldn't have been too excited about that.
Okay. Yeah.
But now I'm like, I've come to appreciate that. I think that's because she's helped me get there.
Right.
And we've learned to both see the value of it together. More like I've learned to see the value in it. She probably knew the value of it before. But I think you work on it, right?
Absolutely. You learn what each other's needs are and you try to arrange your life so that you're each getting what you need. And that's hard.
Yeah, one of the things that you said earlier was you were saying like for those of us who are married to the opposite, right? Like introvert or extrovert, whatever the opposite is for you, or just in a relationship with somebody like that. You said that part of it is recognizing that in them and like just learning about that. What would you like? And I think that's a really good tip. What would you say are some other pitfalls or struggles with being married to somebody who's the opposite of what you are, and like how do we get past that?
Yeah, it takes a lot of grace, right? It takes willingness to. I think it just takes really solid communication with each other and willingness to listen, and willingness to express yourself to the other person. Here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm feeling. I know that we're not always great at that as guys. right? Saying, here's how I'm feeling right now. Sometimes I don't even know how I'm
Yeah.
feeling. I have to pause and figure that out. But if we have some inkling of how we're feeling and why, and we can express that to our significant other, I think they're grateful for that, even if it does lead to having to work some stuff out, at least we're just telling them where we're at and being willing to listen to where they're at too, I don't think I have any super insightful answer. Just talk to each other and listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think that's spot on too. I think that's really, really good input and advice for that.
It's just, again, we get so selfish, right? We get fixated on here are my needs. Here's how I don't think they're being met. And man, we gotta like look up out of that, right? Just that fixation, like look up out of that and look at your significant other or friend or whoever it is that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum from you, and like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I want to help them get what they need too, right?
Yeah. So maybe it just takes being more selfless.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, I'm going to take care of whatever need I have in that moment.
Yeah.
But I think that's just a good tip for any relationship anyway. If we're
Yeah.
always focused on what we receive, our relationships are going to be pretty crappy.
Definitely. Yeah, very, very much so. Like, we get fulfillment in relationships, whether it's marriage or something else, when each person's trying to help the other flourish. That's when relationships excel, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Because nobody likes being married to somebody who's selfish.
Yeah.
Who's just self-focused.
Yeah.
Like that's just annoying. It's just like,
but it's so
bothersome.
natural.
It is. It's our natural tendency
so
for sure.
Awareness of that. Yeah.
No, that's really good. I think it's fair to say introverts and extroverts have different roles in society to some extent, right? They're not completely, right? We all have to operate in society doing social activities and, and working and stuff like that. But do you think, so I think it's fair to say that extroverts and introverts kind of are better at certain things. So how do you think that, like what are some ways that you think maybe introverts can have an impact, like a positive impact, where extroverts will struggle? Like, how can introverts like really help the culture and help society and like have a positive impact? What would you say?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a rough question to ask, but maybe that's a poor way to ask the question.
Well, I think what you're getting at is both ends of the spectrum and the whole spectrum. Everybody has something to contribute, right? That maybe somebody else can't. Maybe as introverts, we can help people slow down. Maybe we can, if we're willing to engage with people and ask questions and stuff like that, like maybe we can ask those reflective questions and kind of draw that out of people, I think people think that usually artists are introverts, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people with an artistic temperament are more introverted. And, I think that the arts contributes a lot to the world and to like our lives having a lot of joy and meaning. And, a lot of times also we're stereotyping a little bit here, but I think there's some accuracy. A lot of times people who are like more engineers or that type of pursuit can be more introverted as well. And they just think so well about these things and are able to think about how much engineering and technology contributes to our life. It's enormous, right? So yeah, definitely introverts have a lot to contribute. Yeah. And what about extroverts?
I think extroverts, I think they can help people benefit from those social aspects of society. Because I love what you're saying about engineers and science and like tech and all that. How like a lot of times, when you think about the stereotypical engineer, right? Like I think we all have a picture in our mind. Maybe it's a little bit different, but like a lot of times those people are a little more introverted or like want to be, working on like maybe they love working remotely because they like, I don't have to deal with like coworkers coming by my office all the time or something. And I totally understand that. But I think that one of the ways that extroverts can help is I think they're a little bit better at, I think a lot of times they can be better at like interpersonal communication and also honestly even just having fun. I think with interpersonal communication, right? If you think about like a work team, a lot of times like the better facilitator for that, who's going to help people kind of work together and come to conclusions together and kind of cooperate and collaborate. I think the people who are going to be probably better at that are extroverts because they know how to navigate social situations, I think, a little bit better often. That's not always the case, but I think certainly a lot of times.
Yeah.
I'd say that's a benefit. And I think another thing is, I think there are some really cool experiences that can be had. But I think sometimes like people who are introverted miss out on those because they're maybe they prefer to be home by themselves. And so they're missing out on like some really cool things that can happen out in the world. And so I think that extroverts can kind of be like the catalyst or like the helping hand to help people like see and experience more things.
Yeah.
I think that's my inclination for how extroverts help, because the way I see it is a lot of introverts, there is an insecurity, not always, but certainly sometimes there's some insecurity socially. And so and I think that like social confidence is contagious, right? Like I can lend confidence to someone else. So if I'm really confident and the person that I'm with is an introvert and they're confident with me, well, then they're going to be more confident doing things with me out in the world. So I think we can help with that, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. My wife who works with the youth at the church with you, Jeff, she's seen that in the youth group. Volunteers who are maybe more extroverted, more out there and want to do things, they'll help the students that are more introverted to like, hey, let's go do this. And that like kind of gives permission, or it's like a really helpful nudge, right? Like, because a lot of us who are introverts, we're not as likely to get out there and try stuff that's unfamiliar, but we kind of want to maybe, or, it's at least intriguing to us. And sometimes a nudge from someone who's extroverted is really helpful for that.
Yeah. I think I think it can have a really big impact and help people, because like maybe I think there's maybe some more out there than people realize that could really benefit them or that they'd really enjoy.
Yeah.
And so like having that person who's that kind of to help bridge the gap into a social situation, it can be really beneficial.
Definitely.
Versus trying to just get out there and be on your own. So okay, well, what would you say then are some tips for, I know these aren't final takeaways, but these are some tips for being an introvert or being an extrovert. What would you say?
I mean, I guess, always in the things that we talk about, we like to think biblically, right? Does the Bible speak into this? And one thing that's really clear biblically is that every human being is valuable, made in the image of God, something to contribute to the world. So I guess that's the first thing, is just embrace, if you're wired, however you're wired on that spectrum, just embrace that, that's how you were created. And that was intentional. God made each of us the way we are on purpose. So that's probably the first tip that I would give. Yeah. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think, tips. So now I don't know. Are we going with specifically like Bible things? Like, things that we think about what the Bible has to say? Do we want to go there right now? Like, should we just hop into that?
Let's go there. Yeah, we only have a few minutes left. So, and I'm operating under the assumption that Scripture has life tips.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree.
Which I know you. Yeah, no.
I get you. I felt like we were answering two different questions at the same time. I think one of the things I think about that's kind of implicit, well, it's actually explicit, but also kind of implicit in the Bible is how important community is. So you're talking about we contribute something and everybody has a place, and that's really important. That also plays right into the idea of like, as Christians, we're not supposed to be isolated.
Right.
The Bible's really clear that we're part of a body, right? Like the body of Christ. And so we each have a place in that and a part to play, but also that we're supposed to be with each other and we're supposed to encourage each other. It doesn't mean we have to be with somebody or with other people, all the time, 100% of the time. But I think it does mean that we need to make sure that we're doing that, or that we're spending time with other Christians, helping each other grow, and being in a community of faith. That really helps us because we see other people who are also growing in their faith, and I think that encourages us and also helps us learn how to, grow closer to God.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair?
Definitely. Yeah, community is important for everybody, introverts, extroverts. And maybe in some ways it's more challenging to be part of community. And maybe in some ways it's a little easier to have a deeper connection with community for an introvert in some cases. But whatever the case, we all need it. We all need the connection to other people.
Yeah. It just can be really scary sometimes, or kind of difficult to get plugged in, especially I'd say it's harder for introverts a lot of times. But I also feel like introverts go deeper when they find those people that they connect with deeply. You know what I mean? Like they can go a lot deeper, faster once they find those people. And I think extroverts, it takes a little more time, even though if they can make connections right away.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think there's something to that for sure.
Yeah. What else do you think the Bible has to say about being an introvert or extrovert? Because it doesn't really speak specifically to like, the Bible doesn't say like thou shalt be an extrovert. You know, it doesn't.
Nope.
It doesn't, or an introvert. It doesn't say anything like that.
Right.
So we gotta pull themes and concepts from the Bible that speak to the issue, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one thing I'd add is that it seems like Jesus was a great example of both.
Yeah.
Being with people. I mean, he was at parties all the time, you know. Kind of got criticized a lot for that, actually being at parties and with all these people and people that weren't, you know, very religious or like, what are you doing with them? And he was just with these people all the time. But then he had this rhythm of like solitude and quiet with his Father and things like that. So I don't know if Jesus was an introvert or an extrovert or an ambivert. He
had to have been an ambivert, right? I mean, like,
you would think. I mean, again, we see both qualities in him and his life. So that just, to me, highlights the importance of both and of all those personalities.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. I think what you mentioned was the other thing I was thinking of is that solitude and you know, like Scripture does talk about like meditating on what it says, right? Like on God's word and keeping it. And I think that's important, and that's hard to do when you're with other people. Prayer in solitude is really hard to do when you're with a group of people. Right. And so there are certain activities / emphases that we see in the Bible that are like things that you do by yourself. Or things that you need to do. Like I think generally speaking, like when we spend time with God and like reading God's word and praying, I think those things, praying can be certainly a group activity, but I think also it's spoken of as like something we do by ourselves. Right. And that's important.
Yeah.
And really good for us. And so I think getting by ourselves and spending time with God alone, I think is really valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that may come, I don't know if it's easier for introverts or not. I just don't know. But I think as an extrovert, sometimes it's hard because I don't want to sit and stop and like be patient and do something like pray because it doesn't feel like action oriented enough for me.
Yeah.
Like I want to do something, you know, I want to go be with people and grow, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
yeah. Strengths and weaknesses both ways, right?
Yeah.
Our question, which one's better? I think, you know, you all understand that's a facetious question.
Yeah.
It's not a better or worse. It's just the differences in each, but the good and the bad and the hard.
Right.
From however we're wired. Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time, Jeff. So any kind of last takeaway that you want to leave with the listeners?
Yeah, I think the thing you said about having grace for each other, dude, that was huge. I think it's so, so important. Instead of just being like, you don't think the way I think, you're dumb, you know? Yeah. Being like, okay, I understand that you think about this differently than I do. And I'm okay with that. And being able to kind of accept that and work with it and seek to meet in the middle, that takes grace and patience.
Yeah.
We got to exercise both of those things if we're going to work together and figure it out and actually like be a cohesive society.
That's good. And I'll just add a little bit to that in closing that God shows incredible grace to each of us too, right? Because again, there's strengths and weaknesses for all of us. And every strength is a weakness, right? Introversion is a strength and weakness. Extroversion is a strength and weakness, depending on how it's used. And so we're all broken, however we're wired. You know, the weaknesses of that show themselves. But God's incredibly gracious. He's forgiving. He's redemptive. And he wants to take you and make you into like the best version of yourself. And so we all get to look to Jesus for that and experience that redemption.
Yeah, it's awesome. So anyways, thanks for joining us today on Deepish Thoughts. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. But if you want to go ahead and follow us on social media, go check us out. If you're listening on, you know, just to the audio version of this, hey, go check us out on YouTube. Or if you're on YouTube, well, I guess you're listening to it, so you don't need to go check us out on any audio platform. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, shoot us a message, leave a comment on video or anything like that. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll see you later.